The first thing I remember is the sound, a slow, deliberate scrape against porcelain, like a fingernail searching for a secret. It woke me at 3 in the morning, not with a start, but with a small, precise dread that sat behind my breastbone and would not move. If you're watching this, know that I have replayed that scrape 1,000 times, and each time it pulls the memory sharper. The tiny ringing in my teeth, the way the light from the hall lamp fell like a bruised coin across the kitchen table. I lived alone in a tiny apartment on the second floor of a building that smelled permanently of old coffee and damp cardboard. My world had its own rhythms, the hum of the refrigerator, the neighbor's muffled TV through thin walls, my own footsteps across the cold tile at midnight. Nothing extraordinary. Until that night. I thought at first it was the cat again, but I don't have a cat. I slid out of bed barefoot, every hair on my arms prickling, and followed the sound as if it were a scent. It led me down the hall, past the mirror where I checked for sleep in my eyes, and into the kitchen where the light had been left low. There, half shrouded in the dark, the silhouette sat at my table. It looked like a person from a distance, but every rational part of me recoiled the moment I saw the face. It wore a mask, ivory, pitted like bone worn smooth, with hollow black eyes and a grin that spread too wide, teeth fixed in a frozen, obscene smile. Ears, pointed and unnaturally upright, cut the silhouette of its head like triangular shadows. The spoon it held glittered in the sick light. A plate lay before it, empty, an offering of absence. My mouth went dry. The scrape stopped. It tilted its head as if offended by the silence, or perhaps by my being there to witness it. I could smell something clinging to it. Iron, old smoke, something sweet under the rot. The spoon moved again, this time not scraping but stirring, the sound like nails circling the bottom of a bowl. It was a domestic action, absurdly ordinary, utensils, plates, a meal. But the figure's posture, the way its shoulders hunched, and the eagerness in the tilt of its head told of a hunger that was not for food in any way I had known. I should have fled. Rational thoughts, shouts, running down the stairs, pounding on the neighbor's door, rushed through me and were strangled by the thick wetness of fear. Instead, I stood there, rooted, watching the mask smile, as if trying to memorize the details, the fine cracks in its surface, the smudge of something dark near the right eye socket, a smear that might have been old blood or lipstick or just paint. My hands trembled, but I didn't make a sound. There was a small, absurd hope that if I didn't move, it might not notice me. That hope died when it set the spoon down and raised a hand without fingers fully formed, claws pressing against the handle as if to show off a prized tool. It did not speak. Its voice, when it came, was the kind that could only be heard inside one's skull. Thin, layered with static, the vowels stretched into shapes that felt like echoes. "You're finally home," it seemed to say, though its mouth had never moved. The apartment felt too small. The walls leaned in like people craning their necks to listen. Behind me, the door to the bedroom adjusted slightly, a draft that should not have been there whispering through the crack. I noticed then the faint smear on the tablecloth, a streak of something dark and dried, as if someone had dragged a hand across woven linen. I will tell you now, the fear in that moment was not loud. It was a slow, patient thing that settled into my limbs and made my skin feel thin. I remember the taste of metal at the back of my tongue. I remember the way the figure's head cocked and how, underneath the smile, something alive moved, a breathing that was not breath. And then, because the human brain always seeks explanation, I started to count possibilities in my head. A bad dream, a prank, a homeless stranger seeking shelter. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself I would reach for the kettle, boil water, and banish the stupid thing with light. Instead, my feet dragged as if the floor had become syrup, and the scrape began again. When the scrape thickened into rhythm, the kitchen lights answered it with a thinner glow, as if the apartment itself had dimmed to accommodate whatever was eating at my walls. I thought the figure would leave after a time, that whatever hunger it had would evaporate with daylight. It did not. Instead, it began to move, as if discovering the room for the first time. Slow, precise, like a person learning how to use their hands again. It reached to the shelf, fingers, if you can call them that, brushing the rim of a chipped mug, then the spice jars, then my old, useless blender. Each contact left a faint smudge, a tender bruise on the world, the way damp paint takes and holds a mark. It watched me while it worked. The mask's hollow eyes were nothing and everything. Black wells that reflected nothing I could name, and yet I felt seen in a way that bruised. It arranged the table as if preparing for someone expected. A napkin folded, a fork placed to the left, the plates stacked in a neat, aching order that mocked the emptiness of the apartment. The plate it set before itself bore a dark ring in its center, like coffee left to rot. For a long moment, I convinced myself I'd imagined the table setting, that terror had rearranged my memory into ritual. But then I saw the spoon move again, tapping at the rim with a patience that suggested practice. I tried to leave. I tried to go to the bedroom and slam the door, to call someone, anyone, but the phone in my pocket was dead, screen black, no vibration, as though a winter had fallen over its circuits. The hall light would not turn on. The building's plumbing answered with ordinary, ridiculous noises, pipes clanking far away. But my knock on the neighbor's door returned only muffled music and a reluctant silence, the kind of silence people use to pretend nothing has happened. When I shouted through the drywall, my voice came back altered, as if the walls chewed it and spat it out thinner and laced with static. Time blurred. I remember a long, slow minute when the figure stood and walked around the table, the hem of its clothing whispering like dry leaves. Its head tilted, exposing the mask's profile. The cheekbones hollowed as if gnawed, the mouth lines stretched into a grin that knew the names of things it had never seen. It reached the other side of the table and paused, and in that pause it did something small and horrible. It set a second plate down, facing the empty chair across from it. The place across from the mask belonged to me, by geometry alone, but the movement felt like an invitation and a verdict at once. I laughed then, a short, brittle sound that surprised me with its fragility. The laugh felt like a betrayal, so the creature laughed back inside my skull, low, wet, and intimate, as if it were the sound one makes while holding a secret in the mouth. The next minutes dissolved into a sequence of tiny betrayals. I found a smear on my sleeve, dark and tacky, and when I wiped it on the tablecloth, it came away sticky and warm, smelling of copper and something else, tea and rust and something animal. I found the kettle boiling on the stove, though I had not turned it on. A low hum filled the apartment, the same frequency as the creature's breathing, and for a dizzy second, I thought the walls were breathing with it. Memory fractured. There are gaps I can feel more than recall. A window I must have closed, a glass I might have drunk from, a phrase I swore I did not say that now sat on my tongue like a foreign coin. I tried to pin these absent minutes with logic, sleepwalking, alcohol, stress, but logic slid through the apartment like oil. Once in the bathroom, I caught my reflection by accident and nearly vomited. The mirror showed me at the sink, pale and hollow-eyed, but when I leaned closer to find my own face softened by fear, the reflection reached for a spoon and lifted it to its mouth. My reflex was to step back, to deny what my own eyes had witnessed, but denial was a fragile shield. The shadow in the mirror grinned and patted its belly, as though it had eaten something I had not seen. It began to speak more clearly after that, no longer inside my skull alone, but with syllables that brushed my ears. Not words at first, only a cadence, a rhythmic hum that matched the scrape and the kettle's boil. Then it parceled out a sentence like a bone. Stay. Short, directive, personal. The apartment hummed as if answering. The chair opposite the mask scraped the floor once, a small, deliberate sound like a clock striking midnight. I understood then that whatever game this was, the rules had been set without me. The choice, if it could be called a choice, narrowed. Either I sat or I watched it sit and learned the shape of my absence. I don't remember deciding to sit down. One moment I was standing against the wall, palms slick with sweat, and the next my body had folded itself into the chair opposite the mask. The wood was cold under me, heavier than it had ever been. The spoon in its hand tilted, glinting once in the low light, and then it placed it gently on the table between us, like a chess player laying down a final piece. The mask's grin didn't move, but something inside its hollow eyes shifted, a flicker of wet red glistening in the dark, and I understood, without words, that this was not a dinner invitation. This was a ritual. The table was no longer my table. The edges had softened, swollen, like bread soaked in blood. The air smelled of rust, wet fur, and an old kennel left to rot. A low growl rose from somewhere below the floor, or maybe from the thing itself. It reached toward me, not fast but steady, its arm long enough that the claw tips brushed my wrist. The touch burned cold. My veins felt like they were filling with static. My tongue swelled with the taste of iron and fur. My eyes stung as if I'd been swimming in dirty water. "You fed me," it whispered without moving its mouth. The words crawled up the back of my skull like insects. "Now I feed you." I tried to stand, but my knees locked, as though the chair had grown roots into my bones. Across from me, the empty plate was no longer empty. A lump of something dark and steaming lay at its center, and with each breath it shifted, as though it were alive or had once been. I don't want to describe the smell. I can still feel it clinging to the back of my throat. The creature picked up its spoon again and scooped from the plate, slow, deliberate, its grin never changing. It raised the spoon to the hole where its mouth should have been. Nothing went in, yet the mound on the plate shrank. When it was finished, it slid the plate toward me. My own spoon appeared in my hand without my having picked it up. Every cell in my body screamed not to touch it, but my hand lifted the spoon anyway, trembling like a marionette's. I dipped it into the mass. It pulsed once beneath the metal. The smell sharpened to something horribly familiar. Wet dog, a faint trace of my own soap. It whispered again, softer. "Good boy." I don't remember swallowing. I only remember the cold spreading from my throat into my chest, the way the kitchen tilted sideways as if the floor had fallen away. My skin itched and tightened, my ears ringing until the world shrank to a thin, high note. The mask leaned close, so close I could smell the rot behind its grin, and pressed its forehead to mine. Images rushed into me. Kennels, cages, bowls, 1,000 teeth gnashing in the dark. Hunger, endless and patient, wearing my shape. My reflection in the window wasn't me anymore. A long, muzzled shadow, black eyes sunk in a pale skull, a grin too wide for a human mouth. When the world came back, I was alone at the table. The plate was gone. The smell lingered. My hands, still gripping the spoon, were slick with something dark. From the hall came the sound of claws against tile, slow and deliberate, like fingernails searching for a secret. I haven't left the apartment since that night. I don't know what I ate. I only know the hunger is still here, curled inside my ribs, waiting for its turn. And sometimes, when the lights flicker, the chair across from me scrapes the floor. Next time, it whispers, "Bring your dog."
Subscribe to Horror Story